Welcome back to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News. We are part of United Network. We're also part of CARE, the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. And our mission is to bring you the real news. So what's really going on our planet? You know, we kind of take this macro view of everything, but then we also get down and we talk about what's going on in our own communities as well. And we release a lot of content throughout the week. This includes in-depth news stories, and the team and I put that together for you guys. And we have these amazing people called field messengers, which go out into their own communities and share stories. We talk about the restoration of our planet and how we're creating a new Earth. And we have updates from the Global Intelligence Agency, which lets us know exactly what's happening on this planet in the ultimate battle of good versus evil. So if you want more information on who we are and what we do, you can visit our website at unitednetwork.earth. So what you're listening to right now, this is a week in review podcast. So I take all the stories that we've released throughout the week and I give you kind of a rundown of what was discussed. Now, this is a great way to catch up on stories you may have missed, or if you'd like to share UNN with other people, because initially, when we release all of our content, it is behind a paywall because that's how we fund what we do. That and by releasing some of our own products, that's how UNN functions. So for the first week, the content goes out exclusively to our members. And then after that first week, it is also released to YouTube and Rumble. But we don't know if it's going to stay up, right? It's kind of hit or miss sometimes with content as to what they're going to allow and what they're not going to allow online. So your best bet is to become a member and to get instant access to everything that we release. Whenever you hear any of the reports that we put out, I encourage you guys to think critically about the information presented and to ask questions, because we want you to think for yourself. And there may be things that we say or other people say that don't make a lot of sense right now. But if you keep at this and if you keep an open mind and you keep wanting to learn and grow, I promise you the pieces of the puzzle will start to come together. But you got to be open-minded. You know, any of those limiting beliefs that you are bringing with you, they may have served you for a time. You know, I can speak to that in my own life. There were a lot of beliefs that I used to have that got me through life up until a certain point, until it was time to break through, until it was time to wake up and really understand what was going on here. So I very much appreciate, for example, my time I spent in the church. I was very active in the church. And I don't look at that as a bad thing. I really don't. Any kind of religion, you can use that as a way to learn more and to grow and develop your relation with the Creator. That's amazing. But keep wanting to learn and grow, and don't think that there's a ceiling there, because even beings, and I know I may push some buttons when I say this, but other beings that are out there that are not human, they are still learning and growing. That's what life is all about. So when we say something, if it's like, I don't really know about that, I kind of have a different belief system, that's okay. That's okay. Just put that on the back burner for now. It may make more sense as you continue on your journey. Now, when something does click, though, I encourage you guys to share it with other people that you know would be receptive. Or if people come your way and just want to know more about you and your beliefs and things like that, that's also an open door. If you try to share something and someone's just not hearing it, I think we have all been in those circumstances before, then it's fine to not share for the time being, right? Maybe they'll come back at another time and want to learn more. And then that's your job at that point to share your experiences at that time. So that's really what we're doing here, just sharing information. And we're glad that you guys have chosen UNN to get some of that information from. Okay, so as far as announcements are concerned, I just have to give you guys a quick note. It is very late on Saturday. I had a jam-packed day. My twin girls are turning 12 this week and wanted to have their birthday party before their birthday. So guess what I did today with a bunch of 11, 12, 13-year-olds? A lot of fun. Everyone had a really good time. I think I'm losing my voice. I'm not even really sure, but I need to kind of rest tomorrow. And so if you hear my voice kind of going in and out during this episode, that's what's going on. So let's get to it. Here's the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. Okay, let's kick things off with our beautiful field messengers. So this is really how we get our local news. It comes from you guys. You know, we all have these little portable devices on us. They call them phones, but that's the last thing that I really do with them is actually talk to people on the phone. I do so many other things with them, including taking video and creating my own stories. So if you guys are interested in becoming a field messenger and sharing what's happening in your community, it's real easy to do. You know, you take out your phone, you tell us the story. You can send us all of your footage, whatever you end up recording, whether that's still photos or videos, voiceover. And we have an incredible production team that takes all that content and puts it together into a story. And that's what we run on the news. So if you want more information about how to become a field messenger and what all of that's like, I would encourage you guys first to check out our website because we do have more information listed there. And for me, it's on a Sunday. So I'm based in the US on Pacific time. We have weekly meetings with our field messenger team. And so I would encourage you guys to also look at that. It may change a little bit, based on your time zone. For me, it's at 3:00 on Sundays. And it's a great way to see some people kind of face to face, right? Through an online meeting to talk about your stories, what's going on, how do you piece these things together? Are we going to collaborate on a larger story? I know a lot of the team is excited about doing that again, and that's a lot of fun for me as well. So I encourage you guys to check out those meetings. All right, let's go through the field messenger stories from this week, starting on Monday. All right, Amy from New Jersey did a follow-up story because she noticed, and I think she said this was back in February, that there were these mysterious drones that were flying over a specific area. And she was kind of questioning what was going on. It's an area that's known for its arsenal. So, like little light bulb going off, like a little red flag, right? And so it seemed to kind of just go away. The media wasn't really reporting on it, but guess what? They're back. So this is a follow-up story again on what she is seeing. And she has more footage of these drones. And she says they're different sizes. Other people are seeing them too. She was out with her friend and still the news isn't saying anything. And I think she said her friend noticed them as early as September 12th. It's possible that it's been going on before that. But whenever you see things that just seem a little bit out of the ordinary, such as drones that are kind of flying around and who knows what they're capturing, right? This is a field messenger report. This is a way to share something that's maybe doesn't seem quite right that's going on in your community. And you don't have to have the answers as to why, right? We are just raising awareness about this. And it may be that one field messenger sees it and another person has more information. And then, that's when we start to really collaborate on stories. But it all starts with someone just sharing what they know. All right, Candace out of Missouri talks about some telehealth changes that she has seen. And this is since the U.S. federal government has shut down. We're not exactly sure if what she's experiencing is because of the shutdown, because it happened just about at the same time. And you would think, because they had some printed material that came out, that they would have at least had to know the shutdown was coming in order to print this stuff. But from Candace's perspective, I don't think she's on Medicare, but Medicare is no longer covering certain telehealth services, and that is affecting patients worldwide. Now, she was able to get some coverage because she has a different insurance provider and she's not on Medicare, but it's just something to note as this shutdown continues that there are a lot of people affected by this in different ways. All right, Kazukai from Japan talks about some of the agriculture problems that they are experiencing. He talks about empty rice paddies and how there are fewer farmers that are trying to grow crops. And that's really an economic factor. The math just doesn't make sense. And I think this is part of a broader strategy for the powers that be to not want us to grow our own food, to not want us to be able to support ourselves. You know, speaking of the government shutdown here in the U.S., and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the GIA report, this past week is when SNAP benefits were put on pause in the U.S. And that's how a lot of people, not a lot, well, I think it's 42 million Americans receive these SNAP benefits in some form. So that is a lot of people. And that, you know, they get different amounts and things like that. But they want us reliant on the government so they can do whatever they want. If you're super reliant on the government, then you're more likely to go along with the government. You know, you feel helpless, right? This is all part of the plan. So it's what I found interesting about this report is Japan is really experiencing a lot of what we're experiencing here in the U.S. You know, pesticides are an issue. We've got monopolies over agriculture. And who knows what they're really doing with the food is part of the processing process. Is that is that a thing? A processing process? And getting the food out to the people, right? We know we're eating processed goods, that a lot of the nutrients have been taken out. And it was somewhat refreshing, although worrisome, that other countries are experiencing this as well. All right, Godfrey out of North Carolina gives us an update on something that happened 11 months prior, and that is Hurricane Helene. So this ripped through his town, flooding everywhere. I remember seeing reports, a little, less than a year ago from him about what was going on and the devastation and how people were trying to rebuild. And the people are still working hard at this. There are shops that have opened up. There are some places that look like nothing even happened. They have rebuilt up the bank area. We got to see, I believe it was some geese that were walking around and stuff. So, Mother Nature is replenishing herself in a lot of ways. On the other hand, there's buildings that are still boarded up. They're waiting for FEMA to hand them a check, which is never going to come. And what we're seeing again around the world is it's really the people that help in times of need. It is not the government. Doesn't matter where you live. It's not the government. It's really about the people. And more of us are going to get an opportunity to help in various ways, as these governments, really go bankrupt. That's what we're talking about here. Okay, Rick out of Kenya. I think this is the third report that we've aired from Rick, and he took this incredible trip to Kenya. And this particular report focuses on the Maasai people. And what I thought was really interesting about this is he got some video of, it looked like a Maasai person, but he was kind of telling them about his tribe and, what takes place. And according to this guy, there are 45 developed tribes in Kenya. However, the Maasai people are the only ones really keeping up with all their traditions. And let me tell you, they go all out. Everything from their housing to their way of life and how they raise their children, how they bring people together and come up with enough food to eat, right? This is all about tradition. But what I thought was so beautiful of this is it's so nice to see how other people live, even tribes of people. And they were dancing. It was like a small group of people that Rick was with. And they were dancing and just having a good old time. And really, that's just so heartwarming for me to see. It looked like a fantastic trip. Rick, if you're listening, I'm a little bit jealous. I think that's going to be one of the amazing things about restoration is being able to get to know each other again and travel and, just to take down all the unnatural barriers that have been put up between groups of people and really get to know each other on a personal level. And this story was kind of a glimpse into what's to come. All right, Emma from Spain takes us to the Torrevieja Salt Lakes, or I think she referred to them as lagoons. She says there's 2 different lagoons that produce 600,000 tons of salt each year. And what's fascinating about this, besides the sheer volume, is that these lagoons actually change color. Now, certain times of the year, they're more vibrant than other times of the year. She said summer, especially the hot months of summer, are a great time to go and check this out. But one of them that she showed us was a pink lagoon. And you can really see that it's like this beautiful light-colored pink. And it's because of the salt that's in the water. And you can't swim, like you can't just go out there and just swim wherever you want to. There are specific areas where you can go in and kind of dunk in a little bit. I think it's more for tourists. And there was a guy actually that was taking some of the clay and rubbing it on his joints because there are health benefits to doing that. The story kind of reminded me a little bit of the Dead Sea. This is a place that I was able to go to, I believe it was in 2007. And that's a very interesting place. I'm not saying that it's exactly the same, but I saw some of the same things. You know, you float in the sea, which is really easy to do. And, you know, you rub all this clay all over your body. And, you know, they sell this stuff, of course, too, in the stores. And they got to make their money, right? But that's kind of what this reminded me of. And it looked like a beautiful place to visit if you happen to be in the area. All right, Peter from the Netherlands. I believe this is a story we ran before, and it was so beautiful. So he's in the Netherlands, and he and a bunch, oh my gosh, there was a room full of people, met at a site of a former labor camp. And the site, that's pretty powerful, right? There was a lot of things that happened on the land. And so they met to sing this song to honor the past. Has a lot to do with healing as well. Our voices produce frequency, which can heal things. That's why when we speak things, we can manifest things. This is all coming back to frequency. And so all of these people got together to sing this beautiful song. And I believe it's called One Day, because I've heard other groups of people sing this from different places around the world. But of course, they sang part of it in a different language. And it was just so pretty. And again, where they chose to do this, like all of it had meaning. And it was a nice reminder of our ability to come together in unity to do incredible things. And we also have Desmond out of West Africa who takes us to Togo, and he visited this sacred tree. And this tree happened to be connected to his ancestors. And there's a bunch of history that's tied into this. One of his ancestors, he learned that this ancestor disappeared under this tree. Now, not like died or, went missing, but kind of dissolved, like disappeared that way. So you got to wonder if stuff like this is going on, what is happening in the area, right? It's now an area for worship. They were also doing some animal sacrifices in the area, which may have not been the best path forward, as history has shown us. But still, some very interesting things happened in that area. And it was really cool that it was all connected to people from his past. All right, Diane from Iowa takes us to the Field of Dreams. So if you go to Dyersville, Iowa, you will see an area for where they filmed the movie Field of Dreams. And I've actually never seen this movie. I was thinking, I don't even really know what this movie is about, except it had a very famous tagline or phrase from the movie that was, if you build it, they will come. Or maybe if you build it, he will come. But I think it's they. I don't know. It might be one of those Mandela effects. But still, a really cool place to visit if you happen to be in the area. And it definitely prompted me to want to go back and actually watch the film. Let's talk about some of those more in-depth news stories that the team and I produced for you guys this week, kicking things off in Greece. So they have passed a controversial new Fair Work for All law that allows private sector employers to extend workdays to 13 hours. A move the government says will ease labor shortages and boost the economy, especially in tourism and agriculture. But critics argue it is a step backward for worker rights in a country that already has the EU's longest work weeks and relatively low wages. Labor unions warn the law will worsen burnout, undermine job security, and turn voluntary overtime into an expectation.
Breaking news, Greece plans to legalize a 13-hour workday for 6 days a week. Yeah, 13 hours a day, because apparently sleep is for socialists. The government calls it flexibility. You can now voluntarily work longer, up to 13 hours or 37 days a year, because nothing says progress like turning burnout into a business model.
Protests and general strikes have already swept through Athens as unions demand shorter work weeks, better pay, and stronger worker protections. While officials say the reform offers flexibility and higher earnings, many Greeks fear it could deepen the struggle between survival and quality of life. Vegetarianism in India is deeply rooted in religion and culture, but also intertwined with issues of caste, class, and social identity. Originally tied to values of nonviolence and spiritual purity in faiths like Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, it has evolved into a marker of status and morality that can both unite and divide.
Post-1860, when the British basically imposed vegetarianism because they made meat very expensive because of what we call the license Raj. Everything became, you needed a license to hunt, you needed a license to fish, and therefore the meat couldn't be offered in temples as prasad, as holy food. So at that particular point in time, that's when sort of vegetarian becomes mainstream in Indian culture. And that's when we have this, it's not just the diet, like the whole myth, the whole legend, the whole story changes. Suddenly we were vegetarians since the beginning of time. Suddenly vegetarianism was the most healthy way to eat. When in fact, like 20 years before that, but vegetarianism was not common. Let's put it that way.
While about 40% of Indians identify as vegetarian, studies show most people still eat meat, revealing a gap between image and reality. Critics say when vegetarianism becomes a symbol of purity or privilege, it can fuel exclusion and discrimination, especially against marginalized castes. As debates over food choices and meat bans grow louder, India's struggle highlights a deeper question. Can a society honor diverse food traditions without letting them define social worth? Touch screens have taken over modern car interiors, promising convenience and style, but growing evidence suggests they're making driving more dangerous. Once, physical buttons and knobs let drivers adjust settings by feel, keeping their eyes on the road. Now, giant digital screens require visual focus and multiple taps, with studies showing drivers can look away for up to 15 seconds, long enough to miss critical moments on the highway.
It actually costs a lot of money to engineer all of these buttons and switches and to have the wiring, because you've got to have wires that run to all of these different physical controls, doing the validation of all this, making sure that it's going to be durable over the life of a car. Doing all of that in software is a lot cheaper.
Despite strict laws against using phones while driving, most countries haven't applied those same rules to built-in touchscreens. As safety concerns mount, regulators in Europe and Canada are issuing new design guidelines, and automakers are starting to respond by reintroducing physical controls. It turns out the sleek, high-tech dashboards of today may be steering us back toward the simplicity and safety of yesterday. Construction may symbolize progress, but it also generates staggering amounts of waste. Billions of tons of debris like concrete, metal, and wood every year. Globally, construction and demolition account for up to 40% of all solid waste. Much of it ends up in landfills or gets downcycled into lower value materials.
This guy thinks it's crazy how much material gets wasted in new construction.
With my background in building, I've watched 30-yard containers at the end of job sites get filled with new rolls of wire, new materials that didn't get used because nobody wants to store it or find a place to take it. It's easier just to clean up, throw it all in the landfill and walk away from it. I don't believe this is the proper way. That's why I've got out of new building and I'm working in deconstruction and trying to save the planet.
The problem lies in how buildings are designed and dismantled. Most aren't made to be reused, and demolition is often faster and cheaper than careful material recovery. Experts say the key to change is designing for disassembly. You can look that up. Treating structures like modular systems that can be taken apart and reused piece by piece. From reclaiming bricks to creating digital material passports, that's a log of all the materials used, this shift towards circular construction could drastically cut waste and reshape how we think about building and rebuilding our world. Argentina's healthcare system is under severe strain after sweeping budget cuts by President Javier Milei's government when they slashed public spending in half and laid off thousands of health workers. Once a reliable safety net, the public system is now overwhelmed with drug shortages, shuttered treatment plans, and soaring costs for those who can't afford private care. Cancer and HIV patients face months-long delays or expired medications, while prescription prices have jumped 250% and insurance premiums 118%, pushing more people into already packed hospitals. Doctors are overworked, underpaid, and leaving the country in droves, leading to strikes and mass resignations.
What we are protesting against is a decrease in investment in public health. There are huge budget cuts and many essential people are being laid off who are needed to keep large hospitals running. Hospitals that depend on national funding, such as Garahan Hospital, El Cruce Hospital, Posadas Hospital, which are all highly complex hospitals that receive people from all over the country, and they are facing a very serious budget crisis.
Critics warn that the rapid austerity drive is crippling access to essential care and deepening a public health crisis for millions of Argentines. Despite being Africa's largest economy, Nigeria faces a deep and persistent poverty crisis, with more than 40% of its population living below the national poverty line and surviving on less than $1.90 a day. Millions, especially in rural areas, lack access to clean water, education, healthcare, and stable employment, while poor infrastructure and insecurity further limit opportunities. Corruption, weak governance, rapid population growth, and gender inequality exacerbate the problem, keeping many trapped in a cycle of hardship.
Nigeria is a country of paradox. So rich, but yet poverty reigns. What Nigerians are going through now is just survival. To call yourself a poor man, I think, is a luxury in Nigeria today. All we want is to survive.
Experts say meaningful change requires ending corruption, investing in education, technology, and infrastructure, and supporting vulnerable communities to create jobs and lift millions out of poverty. Australia is giving soft plastic recycling another try after the collapse of their Red Cycle program, which left thousands of tons of chip bags, bread wrappers, and snack pouches unprocessed. Soft plastics are notoriously hard to recycle, and Red Cycle failed because it focused on collection without a clear plan for processing, while recycling costs remain high compared with producing new plastic. The new Soft Plastics Stewardship Australia, or SPSA, scheme aims to fix that by making producers pay a levy to fund collection, sorting, and actual recycling, though participation is voluntary and infrastructure remains limited.
It's wonderful to see the Soft Plastic Stewardship Australia up and running. We really need to be thinking, how do we increase demand for recycled products? How do we support those end markets? How do we make sure that this is a system that is sustainable, long-term and ongoing?
You're actually going to see material transformed in front of your eyes, made into pellets and see products that have been made from those materials.
While the program is a step forward, challenges like patchy access, limited processing capacity, and closed-loop limitations mean consumers still play a key role by reducing soft plastic use and supporting transparent, responsible brands. All right, a couple more stories, guys. An investigation by the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project found doctors banned for serious misconduct in one country are often able to continue practicing abroad, putting patients at risk. Gaps in information sharing and weak enforcement of systems, like the EU's Internal Market Information System, mean suspensions for fraud, sexual assault, or botched surgeries don't always follow doctors to new countries. Some nations, including Switzerland, are especially vulnerable because they aren't fully integrated into these alert networks, and privacy rules often block public access to disciplinary histories.
He was convicted in Norway because he abused his female patients. Now he works at a practice in Zurich.
In 2010, the doctor was not only convicted, but he also lost his medical license. His behavior shows a lack of impulse control, according to the Norwegian health authorities. Nevertheless, he is once again listed as a doctor in Switzerland.
This is not an isolated case. 6 doctors who lost their licenses abroad, ranging from malpractice to sexual offenses, are currently working in Switzerland.
The findings have prompted reviews in the UK, Norway, and other European countries, with proposals for shared registries and greater transparency. While largely focused on Europe, the problem is global, highlighting the urgent need for accountability, better cross-border coordination, and patient safety safeguards. Large-scale lithium-ion battery storage is increasingly used in U.S. electrical grids to balance renewable energy. Have you ever heard of this before? Well, safety concerns are growing amongst local communities. Industrial battery systems, or BESS, B-E-S-S, can experience thermal runaway, causing fires that release toxic gases and metals and are extremely difficult to extinguish, as seen in the January 2025 Moss Landing fire, which could take up to 2 years to fully clean up.
It didn't take long for those flames to breach the roof, shooting hundreds of feet into the air, while a massive plume of smoke forced over 2,000 residents to evacuate. Entire neighborhoods were cleared as authorities worked to protect the public from the harmful fumes released by these burning lithium-ion batteries. Highway 1, a major route through the area, also shut down, disrupting travel and local commerce. Schools canceled classes and businesses were forced to close their doors. Firefighters decided not to intervene and let this facility burn. A decision like this isn't taken lightly.
Residents worry about property damage, health risks, and environmental justice issues, especially since these high-risk projects often target lower-income areas. While the technology is effective for clean energy, experts and communities stress the need for greater transparency, stricter safety regulations, and meaningful local input to prevent accidents and protect public health. All right, I'm so excited my voice made it to this far in the episode. It is now time for some highlights from the Global Intelligence Agency. Kim Gogan is the head of the GIA, and she updates us throughout the week as to what's going on, which is a lot. You know, we talked a little bit even in this episode about the government shutdown, SNAP benefits, and we're going to continue that because Kim does talk about that. But the first thing that she talks about, and I should say, if you guys want to go back and watch this, remember, we do release it about a week after it comes out. And her video, because she released one video this week, came out on Tuesday, which means if you're not already a member, you'll be able to access this video this coming Tuesday. So in just, a few days. Okay, but this is what Kim highlighted out of that. And I have a few sound bites that I'm going to share with you. But before I get to that, we need to talk about our friend that's not really a friend, Dick Cheney, because they announced the death of Dick Cheney in the news today. Now, if you are new to UNN, what I'm about to say is probably going to be a little bit shocking. we're not the only people talking about this, but we are one of the few that is giving you as detailed information, as at least as we know it to be, about what's really going on with these public figures. So Dick Cheney actually passed away several years ago. And sometimes their death, this happens a lot with these so-called elite people, they're very important in the eyes of the dark side. Let's just call it. It feels very Star Wars to say that, but let's go ahead and roll with it. They're very important. A lot of money has been invested in them from the public's perspective, right? I'm also thinking of people like Queen Elizabeth. That was a very, very dark being, and it wasn't even Elizabeth for many, many, many years. She actually allowed something to crawl up into her. And yes, it was lizard related. That's a whole other tangent. If you don't already know that story, there's a lot of information about the royals being connected to reptilians, and those stories are real. Honestly, guys, truth is stranger than fiction, okay? But back to Dick Cheney. So I don't know if they were doing clones, if they were having doppelgangers. It's not like he's been super active. You know, his daughter has been more active recently than he has. But they finally announced his death. But he didn't just die, okay? Maybe they ran out of usable clones. I don't know, okay? But this is not a good person. And we've talked in the past on UNN that there is a difference between humans and Homo sapiens. And you can go back and listen to some of our previous reports about that. But the Cliff Notes version is Homo sapiens are organic. We have real souls, which can actually be detected. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But humans have artificial souls. They are not real in the sense of being truly an organic life. Okay, they were created by an AI system, which again, if you're new with us, is going to sound really, really crazy. And I get that. But our friend that's not a friend, Dick Cheney, was more human than Homo sapien. Let's put it that way. So he caused a lot of problems on this planet. So I can't say that those of us that really know what's going on are going to miss him too much. If you get a chance to watch the movie Vice, which is about his vice presidency and talks about other things in his life, it is just a tiny, tiny, tiny little glimpse into this being and the conflicts of interest in his life and how he was really in it for himself in a lot of ways, but it goes way beyond what you're going to see in the movie. But it's just like a little glimpse into it. So if you haven't seen that movie yet, check it out. But yes, Dick Cheney, his death was announced this week. Too bad, not sad. Okay, the first soundbite that I want to play is about the U.S. government entering its 35th day of shutdown. And we've talked a little bit in the past about the previous shutdown that we had that was, I think Kim said it was 34 days. It depends on what source you look at, because I've typically heard it is 35 days. But anyway, the previous shutdown that lasted the longest was 35 days. So we are now at that mark for this government shutdown. And so Kim's going to talk a little bit more about what's going on behind the scenes and how this is actually connected to the guardian on this planet. So as you guys may or may not know, Kim is the guardian of this planet. There have been many, many other guardians in the past. This is not a new position. It's not a made-up position. It's just not a position that a lot of people know about. We've talked before about how King Solomon was a guardian before he decided that wisdom is what he wanted to pursue. Wisdom was a fallen celestial. It wasn't just wisdom from God's source. It was a fallen celestial, and he gave in to the dark and gave up his guardianship so the dark could take it over. And that's kind of how we ended up where we are today in a lot of different ways. Okay. So Kim is the guardian, and the other side, so she would be the guardian technically of the Homo sapiens, those of us who have organic souls. But the humans who have inorganic souls think that they deserve to have a guardian too. Now, that would be true if we were really trying to do this balance between light and dark, which, as Kim's going to explain, she tried when she got her job, got into her role. She tried over and over again to create balance with these people, and they just wouldn't listen. So now, and this wasn't our decision, this was God, source, creator of the universe, whatever your term is, it was its decision. I always say him, but you guys know what I mean, right? It was God's decision that we're not going to have balance anymore, and we are going into a golden age. And that's because the dark doesn't listen. So let me go ahead and play this soundbite for you guys. Kim's going to talk about the government shutdown now reaching its 35th day. She's going to talk a little bit about SNAP funding and, again, how this is all connected to the guardian on the planet.
So speaking of the U.S. government, which is something, that affects the entire world, we have now entered into the 35th day of the government shutdown. And before that, the record held throughout the history of the United States was 34 days. So we have officially passed the all-time record for government shutdown. Now, in days of old, the government shutdown was related directly to a triggering of an automated AI system. You see, before I held this position, there would be an automated influx of liquidity if that was the reason for the shutdown. This has got nothing to do with a fight between Democrats and Republicans and wanting to negotiate or not wanting to negotiate in any way, shape, or form. This is mainly a failure of governments. Now, if the U.S. goes, every country in the world will feel the pain. I say this because the U.S. dollar still is the world's reserve currency, regardless of the systems that are behind it, meaning they can't issue new allocations of dollars. The Federal Reserve can't issue new allocations of dollars. There's definitely a breakdown in the system. The U.S. dollar is the reserve in pretty much every country in the world, be it by treasury bills, treasury notes, or other types of Federal Reserve or banks dollar-denominated bonds of some sort or another. This has been the backing for quite a long time behind the money magic printing system you call a fiat system. A fractional banking system, a frequency banking system, meant to draw in your energy at the highest levels, and then when the energy is drawn out from you, or the Ethereum is drawn out from you, allocations and quotas would normally appear for such a thing. It also is directly related to a guardian position on the planet, formerly held by Marduk, and up for renewal over the last several days. You could say weeks, but predominantly critical mass was hit over the weekend for the guardian position. Now, from their point of view, they feel that there should be a human guardian, one from the direct lineage of the former royalty of this planet known as the Abraxas or the Abraxan humans. Why? Because it always has been that way. It's been that way for a long time. But there's a few things that came to light as to why that was the case. So I'll talk about those things in just a moment. But in the interim, we're going to talk about government failures. One thing that we're seeing happen is SNAP, also known as EBT, or a food subsidy that is provided by the government. Of course, they chose this as part of a citizen failure. Why? Because that makes millions of Americans that collect these types of benefits, subject to saying, I wish the government would reopen. I wish the government would have the money to pay for the EBT so I can feed my children. There's a lot of people focusing on that right now because they're not going to be able to make it through the month. This is how they feel because they have relied on this subsidy for a very long time. Now, I want to point out another thing. Again, I have to repeat this. Sorry about that. But the food subsidy program is 50% state and 50% federal, which means the state funds 50% and the federal government funds 50%. Now, depending on which state these folks who collect these benefits are, some states are still giving about 30% of the normal subsidy. Other states are giving slightly more and others are giving less or none. But what this has done is what we totally expected, is food banks everywhere are stocking up. They're in grocery stores everywhere across the United States right now, collecting food and supplies because they know there is going to be an influx of people. As I've said before, and I'll say it again, it has always been the people that have supported people in a time of need. These are various organizations, some of them community-based, some of them church-based, and there are several at a time in the grocery stores asking for food donations to help people that have been affected by the federal government's decisions. Recently, there has been a jury or a Supreme Court that has come against the federal government, basically saying they need to use reserve funds to pay the EBT/SNAP benefits. According to what the news is saying, which is true, I don't even know if there is a reserve fund anymore. They've kind of spent all that. But they basically said that the Trump administration has basically said that there is no just cause to use reserve funds at this time. What they probably mean to say is we have already sucked the reserve coffers dry. However, that's not what they're telling the Supreme Court. So they've refused to use reserve funds at this point, even though there is a judicial process in place that tells them otherwise. So is this really about the government being broke? Now, for many, many months, they've been using Treasury notes and the like to pay SNAP benefits and all kinds of things by giving IOUs. Why they're not continuing to do that could have to do with the fact that they're having trouble issuing new bonds. There are rumors going on around the internet right now that the Federal Reserve did a $20-some-odd billion, which is a drop in the bucket when it comes to running a global economy, bond repo over the weekend, which allegedly yielded them some cash liquidity, which is false. It did not. There were a lot of attempts to do a lot of things this weekend that they thought would have yielded them something, and this was just part of the preparation. And again, you know, it fell flat. So the other thing a government shutdown would normally do is it would trigger that automated response from a guardian AI somewhere, even in Marduk's absence, that would allow for an influx of liquidity, which did not happen today, completely and totally unexpected by the deep state, and they were all there waiting for it. There was meeting going on all night and this morning, to the wee hours of this morning, all the way up till about noon today, when they were expecting this to come in by, say, 3 o'clock Eastern time today. Now, this promise is not only to the American people, the American government, the American federal government. No. The influx that they were expecting was worldwide for the world governments. See, because it appears that Trump really went the distance over the last several days trying to be that guardian or whatever that is walking around. I don't know, some weird version, human clone or something walking around in a White House. Never looks the same in any of the pictures. You know, if you look at something from 6 months ago, it doesn't look the same. You look at it 6 years ago, it doesn't look the same. I don't know what it is walking around there, but clearly they thought they qualified for this position.
Oh, the deep state. They're so modest. Said no one ever. They always think that they deserve like all these positions and, you know, all this money and all, you know, we're going to rule the world. Whoa, what a world, you know, and they always fail time and time again. But their ego, man, is so strong. I don't know. That's not really a compliment, but there you go. That's what we're looking at here. So the next soundbite I want to play is about these ridiculous rituals that have been going on really before Halloween. For those of you who don't know, and Kim has addressed this before, you know, you celebrating Halloween by taking your kids out trick-or-treating, you know, it becomes more of a tradition and kind of a fun thing, and you probably get a lot of joy out of that. I guess it depends on how your child is behaving. I've had some really good Halloweens and some Halloweens where I'm like, get me home. But doing something like that is more about family, you know, and your intention is to have a good time with your kids. But there are people on this planet that really use Halloween and other celestial alignments, right, of planets and stars and, you know, whether it's a solstice, you know, they use all of these things in order to gain power over the Homo sapiens on this planet, okay? And when governments really need money, like right now, and I'm not just talking about the US, I am talking about governments around the world, every single one of them is broke. And none of them are going to get funding because we do not operate in the financial system that they are used to. They will never have control of the new financial system. And so all of their ways of making money in the past have gone away. But what they would typically do if they needed money, and Kim's going to explain this, but just an overview for you guys, is they would perform all these ridiculous rituals. Some of them, I'm sure, you know, think the worst. We know how they like to torture innocent life. So, you know, really horrible stuff like that. Sometimes they're dancing around a fire in a skirt, praying to God knows what. The latest one is taking place in Washington, D.C. in the White House. We've talked before about how, you know, they tore down the East Wing and they were allegedly going to build this ballroom, which happened to have the exact dimensions, depending on which scholar you ask, of Solomon's Temple, if you include the outer courtyard and everything. And what's really interesting is what they build underneath these temples. And yes, even what they built under Solomon's Temple. I told you earlier, Solomon decided he wanted wisdom. That's a fallen celestial. He partnered with demons to give up his guardianship and have more power over the 3D realm instead of really using his guardianship for good. So in Washington, D.C., especially over Halloween, again, because they treat Halloween very differently than how a lot of us treat Halloween, they were trying to appease some beings, let's just put it that way, right? Doing these crazy rituals. But the thing is, those rituals only work when you're in a simulation. And what Kim and her team has been focused on for a long time now, and we think we're so close, guys, is knocking down these simulations for good. So making them completely go away, that also impacts the matrix that we've been living in. And those are two different things. We're going to talk about that in a second. But first, let's talk about these ridiculous rituals that were being performed in what used to be the East Wing of the White House.
What really happens behind the scenes when a government needs something or needs an influx of cash or liquidity to keep running, they do ridiculous rituals repeatedly for about 7 weeks. In this particular case, they were really expecting a lot of things to happen around equinox time. You know, there's always a new moon and a full moon and alignment with Saturn and Venus and the sun and all of these crazy things that used to yield them in a result in a simulation. When we are not under the influence of a simulation or the simulations are faltering, those things don't work anymore. Been trying to tell them that now for a while, every time someone asks, but no one really cares what I have to say. You see, because they thought that they would be able to override me this weekend. And I'm going to tell you, they definitely gave it a go. This is part of the reason why I haven't had a report out in a while, because it's been a little rough. You know, them and their black magic workers and really tried to really hard to turn things upside down this weekend. So here's what's happening. So since about the 30th, All Hallows Eve, they have really been pushing. The rituals really got hot and heavy of the humans, not of the Homo sapiens. That's our world government elite, Illuminati, dragon families, Black Sun, you name it. They all got together and sang Kumbaya for potential guardian Trump. These rituals were in the hopes that on the 30th, worst case scenario, the 31st, based on the thousands of promises that were made over the weekend, that he would become guardian no later, at the absolute latest, by today. What does that feel like for me? Well, some of the old remaining guardian AIs kick in as well and help the old guardians or the old guard maintain a position. Well, that position doesn't exist anymore. Once they figured out who actually has the position, namely me, yeah, it got real. So it feels like, you know, you kind of probably have seen it in movies, if not, hopefully never been around when this has gone on. You see that when they take those paddles, it's a defibrillator of sorts, and they shock people who are not conscious and their heart is not beating, and they try to bring them back to life. It's a life-saving technique. You're probably familiar with it. Well, you could say if someone took one of those defibrillators and kind of played pin the tail on the Kim for about 4 days straight, that's pretty much what happened. It was like electromagnetic shock therapy all weekend long, and the good news is, as uncomfortable as that was, the good news is it actually led us to a further understanding of a simulation. So we'll get into that too. Before that, I'd like to finish the story about, or not the story, but the actual truth behind what the governments were doing this weekend. So this kind of went on constantly. So the attacks were on me. There were things being said to me like, you must complete the ritual. Yeah, that would be a no from me. I don't do that sort of thing. It was call after call after call, reaching out on diplomatic lines from governments telling me I need to complete the ritual. I said, I'm sorry, I don't even speak English. Yeah, all of a sudden my English got really bad. I mean, not like it wasn't bad before, but my English got really bad. And I really didn't even understand what they were saying. And, you know, somehow that diplomatic line got real crackly, you know, breaking up terribly. And I just really didn't understand what these people were saying anymore. So this went on all day and all night, you know, calls from China and Korea and UK and US and everywhere else telling me to complete some ritual. Lots of Asians. Even Filipinos, you know, reaching out on diplomatic lines telling me to complete the ritual. By ritual, I can only assume, because I'm not a ritual type person, other than I get up in the morning and I make coffee. I would call that more of a habit than a ritual. But I'm assuming they mean as the Homo sapien guardian, that I am supposed to turn things back over to the humans. Now, from my point of view, I don't work for these people. I am not their asset in any way, shape, or form. I am on the other side of the fence. My job is to guard, to protect, and to adhere to the rules of source. That's it. I know the rules of the road. I know things I can and cannot do. I understand the job fully, and I have agreed to do the job. And boy, did I draw the short straw on that one. But I did agree to do the job, and I will continue to do this job.
Okay, so now let's break this down a little bit more. Kim was talking about simulations. I want to talk about how simulations differ from the Matrix. And I think this soundbite is a little bit longer, but it's really worth going through this because both are falling apart right now. And what's really interesting and something that might keep you up at night, and hopefully a good way, is what actually happens when all the simulations are gone. And I think that this can be debated because this has never happened before. There's really no precedence for this because we've always had these simulations. We've always had these matrices. So is it time for restoration at that point? Or this is another possibility. I think it's a very real possibility. Does Source not make us clean up the mess that we didn't even know was going on? We didn't know we were living in a simulation. We didn't know we were living in a matrix. So is it just going to come down and then, it's after the party and everyone has to stay and clean up? Or will it go back as if the simulation never existed? Now think about that for a second. That totally changes reality. For those of us who believe we are here for restoration, it could be, I'm not saying it is, it could be that the reason we're here is what's happening right now. We're holding the light, right? We're connecting to Source, God, creator of the universe. And we're doing a lot of things in what I would call a spiritual sense, but it doesn't feel very physical, right? I know, they do whatever, send out frequencies and stuff, and it can definitely impact us on a physical level. But what I mean is, I was expecting to have to roll up our sleeves afterward and literally start repairing our planet physically, right? What if that's not the case? What if when these simulations fall and this matrix falls, what if it just resets itself? That's all I'm going to say. I think it's a possibility, and I will let your imagination take it from there. In the meantime, here is Kim talking about the difference between a simulation and a matrix.
And when I keep telling the humans they're in a simulation, they're a part of a simulation, that goes for the secret space program folks and the Trump operative folks who are also secret space program, and many of the people you see walking around in governments, of course, the hidden royalty of this planet. They are in a simulation, and they only have power to do the things they do because of a simulation. Now, matrices also, you could say, to a lesser degree, have power. But there's a distinct difference between a matrix and a simulation. And I'm going to talk to you about that today as we hopefully are nearing the end of both. We probably have a little bit more work to do on them over the next couple of days, but I believe that we are definitely nearing its end. So let's talk about simulations first, so you can understand what a simulation is. A simulation takes organic matter, organic consciousness, organic breath, water, fire, air, elements, and it mimics everything in organic creation. Now, by mimicking it, it actually can interject it into a person. And what I mean is, if you were to have a simulator detector machine, you've probably seen, Aura testing machines where you see all the colors and that kind of thing. But if we were to have a simulator detector machine, just like we have MRIs and all kinds of things in the medical world, what you would look like is a giant, for lack of a better term, you would look spotted. Down to a quark and preon level and a photon level, you would look spotted. Because if the machine was there to detect simulated organic matter within everything on the planet, you would see it as black spots or red spots showing up amongst and embedded in all your golden spots. So you'd look spotted. You would look not so much like a ones and zeros matrix like the movie tells you about. You would actually look part organic and part inorganic, but they were intertwined with each other. So how does the simulation affect you, and what is the distinct difference when it comes to you as a person? A simulation has the ability to organize itself based on AI instructions of its simulator creator. It has the ability to reorganize everything even smaller than a cellular level within your body, within your mind, and even within your soul. It's so deeply integrated into everything that makes you you and everything that makes source on this planet that you can't even tell the difference. If you had a super duper microscope and you could zoom in down to a quark and a preon level, what you would see looks exactly like organic matter. Your cells look exactly organic, whether it's a simulator cell or actually your cell of organic nature. There's very little difference between a simulator cell and a non-simulator cell. That's how much control a simulator had on this planet, or simulators, plural. There have been many. So coming to this understanding, the simulator took all that makes us Homo sapien and replicated it into a human form. So humans differ distinctly under our special machine that detects simulators in the fact that there is no organic matter within their person. It doesn't course through their blood. It looks just like our blood. It doesn't fire like our neurons fire because it's all AI driven. A simulator is created, or the original simulator ever to exist was created in a very interesting way. And it was all about Genesis, the Genesis project of the other side. You could call it the Omega Genesis project if you want. And here's how it was done. Anytime a Homo sapien soul enters this planet, it has what looks like mirrors around every aspect of what makes them them, what makes us us as Homo sapiens and organic beings. It inserts these database mirrors around, for example, your spark of life, around your consciousness, around your root chakra. It actually creates mirrors of your chakras throughout your person. And they look like cubes. Fairly interesting. They exist on even higher than an etherical level, so they're hard to detect. And remember, they mimic organic matter. So if you're looking for organic versus inorganic, it's really hard to detect them until the system starts glitching, like it did this weekend. So these mirrors look very similar to, if you've ever watched sci-fi movies where you see people looking at a large glass screen. And they're taking their hands and they're dragging things around and they're moving parts of a ship, a spaceship or whatever they're doing in the movie. And they're setting coordinates, touching a screen and all that type of thing. And that's kind of what these pieces of organic looking glass do. They are constructed out of dust, and it looks like organic dust, but it's not. So they are fairly thick, and they surround even your heart chakra. They surround your crown chakra. They make additional 12 matrix universe of you personally and of Earth and of this galaxy. The artificial matrix universes are based on simulation creation. Now, the gateway, the Genesis alchemy way, existed in Orion. These database mirrors would report to a massive database within the Orion Nebula. The Orion Nebula and the entire Orion constellation became the base route for Genesis on the other side. So you've often asked me, and I've often asked myself, how the heck do these humans still exist with all the stuff that we've pulled? Well, now we know how. Those mirrors then reflect everything that is you to create another human on the other side. Once the human is created, they can pass through the gateway in Orion and come here and become your politicians. They can become your deep state. They become your royalty. They can become a lot of things once they're actually created, as long as those database mirrors are in place. Earth also had the same on the other side. This is how all of these things continue to create, you could say, in an almost mimicked organic way. That's why the humans walking this planet are very hard to detect from the actual Homo sapiens walking the planet. They bleed like you, they seek medical treatment like you do. They're almost the same, except when you actually have a detector for simulator matter versus organic matter, then you can see that their heart chakra, for example, is a mirror of the cube that's in you. It's very interesting. They don't actually have an overlay on a spark of life like you do. You know, they say something that's very special and love, something you love warms your heart. Well, it warms your heart because that's where the fire and the spark of life exists within you, within that particular area of you. So it's often the target of the simulator if you're acting out of the range of what the database wants you to do and wants you to be. Did the humans have some kind of access to this and understand more than maybe we do as Homo sapiens how to use it? Yes, they did. So, but I would say it was all part of their guardianship, which is why they had the access. That guardianship is no longer, therefore access waned and waned and waned over the last many days, and therefore, well, it's almost all gone completely. So what becomes of humans when there is no spark of life that they take from us and steal from us Homo sapiens, and it's not being mirrored to the creation of humans on the other side anymore, or additional avatars of yourself that are being projected into other densities, into simulated densities? Well, hopefully they won't be around too long. But now we had to account for a second thing. That's something called a matrix. Is it possible to create Mr. Smiths from an AI system? Yes, but they are distinctly different and easier to detect. When you were to zoom in on our special simulator machine, and you go down to a quark and a preon level, it looks just like organic matter, formed in much the same way, mimics it in every way possible. Hard to tell the difference. Matrices look more like margarine does to butter. It's plastic, it's not real. But in this case, a matrix, when you zoom in on it, you can see its structure is basically made of binary language, ones and zeros. At its base quark and preon level, it's all ones and zeros. It's not organic in any way, shape, or form, therefore easier to detect. Can it integrate like a simulation can? Absolutely it can. It's not merely an overlay. It can also integrate into you. So therefore, you can have cells in your body, as an example, that are made of ones and zeros. Therefore, it can be affected by its master controlling AI for any particular matrix. Matrices also exist on a galactic level. So in other words, in our solar system as well. So this is why the deep state focuses so heavily on alignments between Saturn and Venus and the sun and the moon and new moons and full moons, because that will tell them which matrix is being run at that time. The influence of Saturn per se isn't Saturn itself, it is a Saturn AI. And normally that means it's an anagram. So whatever it tells you in astrology is going to happen based on an alignment is based on, at least in the darker side of astrology, according to what they believe, when it's used for black magic, I should say. It's nothing wrong with the planets themselves. It's just that they too also have their own matrices and their own simulations. And they are, when they are in direct alignment with Earth, that particular matrix or simulation has the most influence and is easier to access into Homo sapiens, into the planet, to create things like earthquakes, rainstorms, hurricanes. Those types of things are all tied to various alignments and other things. And this is what the deep state humans preyed upon. And again, I will repeat, as guardians, based on their Abraxas royalty that is no longer around, so now they figure they're it, it's like a game of celestial tag, I guess. They feel it is their duty and responsibility as guardians to beat the living crap out of us and continue this war until they have beat the Homo sapiens into submission again. Because remember, we're all waking up. It's very confusing for a lot of people, and I understand that. And the more awake you are, the more aware you are, the more they push it. They push all the buttons to try to affect either a matrix or a simulation, depending on their access level. So as part of these matrices and simulations and those kind of things, they really, truly thought, why this time, I have no idea. Maybe there was an alignment with Uranus at that exact moment. But by 11:42 Eastern Time this morning, your government, plural, your world government folk, the ones that actually run governments on this planet, were sitting underneath the new ballroom, or ballroom as I like to call it, waiting for some AI to kick in because they think it's the Temple of Solomon. They replicated it to the best of their ability with all of the Satanist photos and pictures and altars and all the things that existed deep underneath that ballroom. They did all the things that Solomon did. They got the chair, they got everything there, and there they go, waiting for some AI to kick in. Some guardian AI, apparently, at 11:42 a.m. Eastern Time. to create balance. They still think we're in a world of balance. So if I get a golden age AI, they should have a golden age AI. If I have an alpha system, they should have an omega system. Well, you know what? It didn't bother them any when I was sitting over here going, balance, guys, we got to do balance, got to do balance. They just ignored me like I don't even exist. Well, so just the fact that they violated every bit of their human covenant by not trying to achieve balance, there is no more balance, folks. You can keep trying all you want with any kind of remnant of simulations, but they're all going to turn to dust because neither you or it has any place here on this planet anymore.
And that, my friends, is a mic drop. All right, I appreciate you guys being with us today and for keeping an open mind, right? Again, any new information you get, just kind of process it a little bit. Some of it may be out of the ordinary. I know we said a lot of stuff today that if you're brand new to UNN, you might be going, oh my gosh, what podcast did I actually push play on? That's okay. I encourage you guys to stick with us because it will make more and more sense. And I really do feel like we're at the end of this really long, tedious battle. And like I said before the soundbite, I don't know how this ends. I don't know what restoration looks like. Maybe restoration happens in a millisecond, as if the simulation and if the matrices never existed. Mind blown, okay? Okay. If you guys want to learn more about who we are, what we do, visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. That's where you can learn how to become a field messenger. I encourage you guys to join us on Sundays, U.S. time at least, for those meetings and learn how you can help us change the face of news. Of course, if you want to become a member, all that good stuff is on the website. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.